Hello wonderful people, it's Wild here. Today I'm going to be showing you some inspiration to use in your gardens. We'll go through several different designs and I'll talk about the key features and how you can implement these to work with any build or landscape. As we go through each style, I'll tell you about some key tips, tricks and principles for designing gardens. So by the end of this video, you'll be a garden designing master. Let's get going. Oh, and a quick note, the timestamps for each of these designs will be in the description down below. This first design is for a cherry blossom garden. Let's head into this garden going underneath this archway. You can use archways like this one to create an entryway to your space. As we come along this pathway, you can see I've got different areas set up. This one here is for a swing set, which I've hung from the tree. At the end of the pathway, you come to this kind of semi-circle gazebo where we have a seating area set up with a campfire. And then off to this side, I've got a little picnic set up here with a little basket, a mat and a cake. You can see the importance of defining different spaces within your garden. That will make it a lot easier to design your whole space because you'll have a reason to be creating decor within your space. Another great tip is to let the natural elements dictate your color palette and design theme. So here we've got all of these beautiful cherry blossom trees. So of course my decor is going to be based around that. So all of my wood that I'm using in here is the cherry blossom wood. I've gone for a really sweet theme with these heart pots. And then I've got pink and white flowers all throughout. Since these cherry blossom trees have such a natural feel to them, I've also kept the space feeling really natural. So my pathway is not rigid, it's kind of looks like it might be kind of crumbling apart like the garden's been here for a while, and then it's a little bit overgrown with the grass. Now, just like the rest of my gardens, this space fits within a 21 by 21 square, so it really shows that you can fit a lot into a garden if you define the areas. This next type of garden is a maze garden, so the main feature here is the maze, so I've kept the planting around the outside fairly simple. I've also created a small fence in the same key colors that I've used for the maze itself. Now, of course, it's very important to test your maze, so I've created this maze and then I've gone through it to make sure it works. Now if we head inside this maze going underneath this little archway, let's see if we can make our way towards the center. You can see I've put in some pots with some mushrooms. Now you could go with anything, but it's nice to have a few little features on your pathway towards the center. Now I think I need to go through here, and here we are. Now I've got a pretty small maze here, so for my feature I've gone with a lantern. But if you've got a larger space, you could create a larger maze with a central section, perhaps containing a fountain. Or you could have the maze go all the way through to the other side to lead towards your house. The option is up to you. Now, of course, I've gone with a more traditional design for my maze, but you could take the same maze concept and use any sort of style. You could create a cherry blossom maze, or a modern maze, or a jungle maze. There's so many ways to make a maze. Next up, we have a Japanese garden. And the key idea here is about framing your garden spaces with either a wall, fence, or even some planting. So this bamboo around the outside areas of the Japanese garden are creating a frame, making it feel like an exterior room. Another thing you can see going on here, especially if I fly up, is that we've got a balance between symmetry and a bit of irregularity. So in the symmetry, we've got our symmetrical torii gate, our symmetrical lanterns and pathway and fountain. We've got sand on both sides of the pathway, but to break it up, on this side I have a little seating area, and on this side I have a Zen garden. I've also got these lanterns floating above, and they really add an atmospheric look to the garden. Another natural element that I've got coming in here are these rocks, and you can see that I've got them scattered about the garden. So here we've also got the balance between the natural elements, so these are rocks, and the bamboo and the sand, and the built elements like the lanterns, fountain and wall. If you're creating a fairy or mushroom style build, this mushroom garden might be the right one for you. If we take a walk along this pathway, we really feel like we've entered a magical fairyland. For the pathway itself, I've gone for a natural design. We walk past these planters and custom lighting, over a bridge across a river, and if we weave our way through this way, we fall upon a little seat where we can sit down and enjoy the whole garden space. I can also hop across these stepping stones here to get back to the start of my garden. So one thing you might want to think about when creating this style of garden, or any other style really, is how you could use custom trees, or in this case mushrooms, to really fill up the space purposefully. So these custom mushrooms mean that I can have them leaning over the river like this, and it makes the bridge feel even more inviting. I've also made a bit of a story as you walk through the garden. You feel like you're discovering something new around every pathway. As well as the planting going on naturally around the place, I've got these planters, and then of course I've got some themed lighting as well hanging over the pathway. And these stepping stones, as well as the bridges, mean that you can have a waterway going through your garden and still feel connected to every part, and it's a whole lot of fun hopping across these stepping stones. This next farm style of garden could work for any kind of build, from a medieval house to a cottage to perhaps a windmill. So you can see that the whole thing here is farm based. So we've got lots of wheat fields, and I've gone with a more natural shape for these, and that means I can fit them in and around my path. This is a really great way to integrate your planting into a landscape design, and it means that you can get a lot of farming in quite a small space with lots of other decorations as well. Another tip when creating a farm style of garden is to make your animal pens feel special. So you can see here I've got a chicken coop, and if we come through this way and shut my gate, I've got these little nests here with eggs inside of them, and then I've created a little chicken coop, and you can see that my chickens are sitting up inside. Isn't it adorable? I've even got a little place to collect my eggs. And over this side, I've created an area for some sheep. And so it's not just a square pen, I've created a more organic shape. And then I've made this here little kind of lean-to sheep shed to shelter my sheep. Some of the other decorative elements I have going on here are some fences alongside a more kind of natural shaped path. We've got lots of hay bales. I've got a little water trough here nearby my sheep. And then of course, a farm wouldn't be complete without a scarecrow. Now you could use a scarecrow in any style of garden where you've got some crops. They are really cute, and if you use a jack-o'-lantern like this, it provides some light to your garden as well. Another garden design tip that this garden really showcases is how grass can be used as an actual plant as well as just kind of part of the natural landscape. So you can see here the tall grass as well as this regular grass gives it a more rustic appearance. If it was more flat, the hay would really stand out, but by planting some grass alongside my crops, it all blends together and it feels like a cohesive space. Now for a really different garden. This one is a modern design. Let's go up above so you can see the layout. So you can see we've got a really geometric path weaving through the space here. You can see it has a very square shape. Then off to this side, we've got a little seating area. And then we've got some planting spaces. Now all of my areas for my planting are square in nature. So you can see we've got some rectangles, we've got some little 1x3 stripes here with some planting in them, and I've got those set one back from the pathway. I've also got little fences created with glass. This really defines the space and the pathway, and these materials like the glass and the quartz and the concrete are so great for creating a modern feel, as is the deep slate tiles here, and you can see I've used that throughout the space as well. As for my planting, for this garden, I've stuck to lots of greens. So I've built a mangrove leaf hedge all the way around the garden. Then I've got some cactuses and bamboo, as well as some hanging azalea pots to add a green lush feel to the space. And you can see I've contrasted the very geometric shapes of the built elements in this space with a really natural feel with the planting. So we've got bamboo and our cactuses at different heights, and then I've covered all of the grass blocks within the space with these tall grass to give it a more natural feel. If we come back to this covered seating area here, it really has a very modern design with its stripe between the quartz and the glass. This provides just enough cover and it lets in lots of natural light. And then here for the seating, I've gone with this sandstone, which works really well with the sand that we've got going over on the planters here, so it all ties together. For our next garden style, we're looking at this jungle or tropical style garden. So here, this is a great way to make use of the new bamboo blocks, and you can see I'm combining that with the jungle wood. So the main feature of this garden as you come up this cobblestone pathway is that we have this lake here with a little gazebo in the center and an eating area. You can hop across these stepping stones to get into the little gazebo on the water, and then if you hop over this way we can come up this ladder, and then we have a whole pathway of bridges leading through the treetops all the way up to our very tippy top viewing area. And you know what, let's pop up here and we can even creep our way out to have a look down on the whole garden. It's a really cool layout. But let's come back down and take a better look at some of the elements. So here, this is a really good showcase of how you can combine both nature and planning into your build. So you can see this whole garden has a very natural feel, but everything's very purposeful. I've planted my trees in a little crescent shape to allow me to place this bridged pathway through the trees. I then created this circular lake, and using a water feature like this can really elevate a garden. I've then got enough space around the outside area of my lake to put in some of these planters, and here I've got some raised garden beds like these two here, as well as this garden bed over here which is set into the ground, and I've got some melons and carrots and pumpkins here. As for the planting on the rest of the ground, I've kept it to a simple palette of some grass as well as some of these dandelions, and the yellow ties in really well with the bamboo. Whatever style of space you're creating, be it a mushroom fairy design, a Japanese design, a country or cherry blossom design, or a jungle one like this one, it's always really a great idea to theme your lighting, as it will really enhance the overall theme of your build. So here, since we've gone with a tropical theme, I've got these tiki torches, and then I've also hung some lanterns through the pathway to accentuate that treetop feel. If we jump back over to this Japanese garden really quickly, you can see that the theme lighting here is our Japanese lanterns and our floating lanterns. And over here in the mushroom garden, you can see I've got some lights hidden within the mushrooms, as well as these lights here where we've got the red tying in with the red of the mushroom trees themselves. But back to this jungle style garden, some other places I've included bamboo are in these trellises where I've put some vines, and this is a really great way to add some subtle framing to a build. You can see I've got them placed around the outside of the area, and then I've got these little clumps of bamboo planted in and amongst my jungle trees. For our next garden design, let's take a step inside Hobbiton. Now for my garden here, I've based it around this little Hobbit hole house, but of course you could use this same style and theming of garden for any fantasy themed build. You can see my key elements here are this beautiful hanging string of lanterns where I've got some custom banners, and it really does look magical. I've also framed the build with some fencing, and I've got a tutorial for all sorts of custom fencing that you can check out in the description down below. As well as the description down below is a tutorial for all sorts of lighting, so make sure you check that out. Some other decorations I've got going on here include this little wheelbarrow, and then a cart over here with some potted flowers and some hay. When looking at this garden, you can really see two key things. One is that it's important to keep your color palette cohesive. So here I've gone with mainly reds, and that ties in with the bricks that I've got going here in the house. And another is the importance of bushes. You can see I've draped these over the top of my little Hobbit hole house, and I've got them along the pathway as well. Since these bushes don't naturally generate in Minecraft, it really does make it feel like you've planned out your space, and they're super simple to create. If we have a look at this one, for example, you can see I've kind of got my main blob of a bush, and then I've just added a few leaves off to either side just to give it a more natural shape. And I always like to plant a few tall flowers and some ferns around my bushes as well. Now let's look at a classic cottage style garden, and we've got quite a lot to unpack here. It's a very full space. But to begin this garden, I started by creating this path that winds through the area. For a cottage garden, I think it's nice to create a path that looks like a worn cobblestone path. So you can see I've mixed in some of these stone bricks with some mossy blocks, and then I've used these buttons and pressure plates to add texture. Cottage gardens are all about mixing your edible plants with some florals, so I've got these garden beds scattered amongst the garden space where I've planted some potatoes, carrots, wheat and beetroot right alongside my flowers, and it really does look very pretty. Another thing that you need to think about when creating a cottage garden is the built elements. So at the back here I have a small summer house where perhaps you might be studying your flowers. And I've created that with lots of wood tones to aid in the natural appearance. A little further down the path this way, I have a small seating area where you can come and relax and maybe have some lunch underneath the beehive. In this section of the garden, I've set up a little planting station. We've even got some empty pots ready to go out in the garden with things in them, and of course a composter to fertilize all of these beautiful blooms and edibles. And then over this way, a cottage garden always needs a little lawn space, so even in a small garden like this one, I've left a little bit of space free. As for the planting scheme in a cottage garden, you can really go all out. So if we have a look around here, I've got just about all the flowers. I've got them in pots, I've got them in these large decorated pots, I've got planters, I have pots up on tables, and of course I have lots of garden beds and bushes. There is just greenery and flowers everywhere, and it's a symphony of colour. If you're planning on creating a garden like this where you use all sorts of colours to create a really vibrant colour palette, make sure that you distribute your colours evenly. So you can see I've got red distributed throughout the whole garden, pinks and blues throughout the whole garden. There is a bit of every colour everywhere, and that makes it feel purposeful that you have all of these colours all coming together. Every garden you create is going to be a little bit different depending on the space that you're working with, the build that you're designing it around, and the style you plan on going with. But you can use some key principles to make your design process easier. I always like to start by placing in my pathway, and almost all of my gardens will include some sort of pathway, whether it's a defined pathway like this one behind me in the Japanese build, or a more loose pathway like we've got over here in the jungle build, where it even goes over water. Once you've got that in, the next step is to add in any large built elements. So if you're going to have a lake, make sure that's in there, or a river, make sure you've got that in. Or in the case of gazebos and archways, at least mark out the space for those, and you can even come back and add those in later. Once you've got that in, make sure you come up with a solid colour scheme and go with it throughout the whole build. Don't be afraid to break and replace things as you create your garden to get the feel you're looking for, and you can get creative by coming up with different purposes for your outdoor spaces, whether it's a seating area, a farm, an eating area or a maze, or even just a nice place to sit and enjoy the greenery. If you're looking for some inspiration and tutorials for some furniture and outdoor decorations, make sure you check out the description below. There's lots of tutorials to give you plenty of inspiration. And if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you check out my Patreon to get access to world downloads, server access, custom videos, and so much more. I'd love to have you join my legend community. So now you have plenty of tips, tricks, and ideas to create your dream Minecraft garden. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in another video.